The first speaker of today is Andrew Clay, and some of you might know him from his essay BMW Films and the Star Wars Kids, Early Web Cinema and Technology, which was recently published in the Cinema and Technology Reader. And there, Andrew shows a very in-depth approach to online cinema, and I think he will share some of this with us today, with his talk about web cinema, Mind the Gap. Andrew is a lecturer, or actually he's lecturing in critical technical practices at De Montfort University, Leicester, UK, and he's the program leader of media technology in the Faculty of Computer Science and Engineering. So good morning, and I give you.
Thank you, Andreas. Thank you. Good morning, everybody. And I must say, I was very excited to be invited to this event, and I'd never heard of Video Vortex before, to my shame. But I was so pleased to see that there are other people who are thinking about the things that I am, and maybe further on about thinking about them than I am. So thank you very much. And if I ever do get blasé about being in a sphere on the end of a stick, way up in the air, then you have permission to kick me, okay? So I just think this is a fantastic venue, so congratulations. My use of the word gap has two dimensions. The first refers to the closing of a gap between production and consumption as prosumption, whereby the technologies of audiovisual communication are opened up beyond professional media to allow user-generated content. Secondly, the gap is also a conceptual widening, or rather a vacuum, that's created by the championing of participation culture over screening culture for online moving image technology. I think we should be watchful and critical of the rise of participatory media culture and the noise of YouTube as the dominant online video culture. Web cinema consists of diverse digital video cultural practices, including car manufacturers such as BMW and young kids who copy and paste using desktop video technologies. The online cinema is also part of the expanding market economy of modernity, where the old and the new is the dialectical novel as the ever same that Walter Benjamin invokes to lay bare the myth of progress. There are two distinctive technological realignments of cinema. The first is the convergence of the feature film with television. And more recently, a second shift has begun with the development of computer and network audiovisual technologies. To me, this is a much more disruptive development because it's disconnected film culture from the commodity of the feature film. Historically, I think we're in a period of early web cinema, which is characterized by a renaissance of short filmmaking that we first encounter at the birth of cinema. Once again, as in Gunning and Gaudriot's conception of early cinema as a cinema of attractions, the technology of the moving image itself is a fascination for audiences and reconfigured as users. The sense of the newness of web cinema is an experience of a technological shift. At the beginning of cinema, the Lumière cinematograph was a combined camera, printer and projector in the control of showmen. At the emergence of web cinema, the computer is a personal moving image screen and video production workstation in the command of users networked together on the internet, which has been opened up to the forces of the market and traditional commodity consumption and production, but with a greater democratized access to cultural production. Several people have identified rightly, I think, that early web cinema is a cinema of attractions. The visual curiosity of novice spectators of early cinema was for the exhibitionism and the exciting spectacle of lifelike photographic movement. Similarly, there's a curiosity about early web cinema on the basis of an exhibitionism that addresses an experienced viewer, not in terms of the magic of illusionism, but about the possibility of what they might be able to see or do. Viewing as an individual on a monitor screen echoes the pre-cinematic kinetoscope, and the mobile internet locates the spectator once more in a position of private amusement in a public space. Early cinema was pre-industrial in the sense that it had a homemade artisan quality, although in a professional context. But this cinema collapsed and was replaced by the rise of the Hollywood Dream Factory. With hindsight of cinema's maturity as a theatrical screen, should we expect the short web film to prove to be only a temporary disconnection from the mainstream of feature film culture as web cinema matures into an entertainment form? Watching online feature films is not a wide practice at the moment. In fact, online cinematic culture has taken another turn with the recognition of the participatory media culture of social media and Web 2, a turn I will return to later and make a plea for a counter-cinematic online screen culture. In the early years before YouTube, videos were made available on websites so that there seemed to be emerging a very distinctive film culture from traditional professional and amateur sources. My thinking about the online moving image is influenced by the work of Walter Benjamin and takes the Arcades project in particular as a model of stepping-off point for theoretical and historical inquiry. There are two reasons for this. One is that the Arcades project develops a way of working in fragments and uses a model of history consisting of non-linear montage-like juxtapositions and alignments of cultural objects, a technique I think that is particularly suited to writing about the internet. And I will come to the second reason later. The Star Wars Kid is an illustration of the participatory pre-YouTube trajectory at play in web cinema. SWK Culture began in November 2002 when a 15-year-old French-Canadian called Ghislaine Raza recorded himself in a school video studio imitating a Jedi warrior from Star Wars. In April 2003, about 2 minutes of the video was transferred to a computer and linked to the Kazaa peer-sharing website by fellow pupils. A few days later, an original remix was added, and then hundreds of other movies involving digital manipulation of the original video, often inserted into found film and television footage, were made available via dedicated fan websites. I've juxtaposed these two things to think about the technological manifestation of the expanding market economy in which the potential of digital technology and social organisation for cinematic practices is socialised. In both cases we see films that contain highly resonant commodity fetishes, luxury cars, and internet icons, what we might now call YouTube celebrities. Web advert movies, films which are part advert, part film. With these films, I think the audience are simultaneously empowered and targeted as users and consumers through media products that are novel and continuous, newly responsive, but also intrinsically commercialised. And it's the connectivity and two-way communication of network media that allows that to take place. The Hire campaign centres on a series of 8 short films, generally 6 to 8 minutes long, that were produced by BMW of North America for a designated website, bmwfilms.com. between 2001 and 2002. The project was coordinated by David Fincher, a Hollywood executive producer, and by an advertising agency called Fallon Worldwide. 10 million films were downloaded from the site, 2 million people registered online, and tens of thousands volunteered survey information to the company. The effectiveness of BMW films and its significance as web cinema is the way that it achieved the quality threshold that made the technology an attraction for movie fans. Each film had a budget of over $1 million and was directed by a feature film director with international reputations, people such as John Woo, Ang Lee, Tony Scott. And each film showcases a particular model of BMW and stars Clive Owen as an enigmatic driver for hire. The BMW cars that are aestheticized in the hire are fetish commodities on display, but not to the extent that their presence is obtrusive or lacks integration. It's the films themselves that are on show, not as great adverts, but as web cinema that has achieved the distinction through the deployment of high-quality technological resources and Hollywood cultural capital. In fact, it could be argued that the cars themselves are the least interesting elements of the BMW films. And this is in contrast to the Star Wars kid, whose presence demands our attention and our complicity in the viral distribution of his humiliation. I won't show, I don't think I've maybe got time to show one of the BMW films, but they are now available, of course, on YouTube. So if you want to have a look at them, they are very interesting. But I will, if I may, show the Psycho Kid film. So I'll do that now. Okay, thank you Thank you for coming back. Great. Well, I was just saying there in the coffee break that it's interesting that a talk that was called Web Cinema Mind the Gap should have an enforced gap, which I think is a really neat thing. So always go with these things. I believe strongly in serendipity and those fate and those kinds of things. In the same way that Hollywood cultural capital makes the BMW films interesting, it's the presence of the Star Wars kid as a commodity on display among the cultural heritage of cinema and television. In this case, Alfred Hitchcock's Psycho, that gives this web cultural practice its significance. However, there's a neat reversal that justifies juxtaposing these two disparate examples. Whereas the BMW films is a series of adverts that are commodified as films, the Star Wars Kid videos are films that are fetishized as adverts. These parodies are advertainment that advertise the love of film as a cultural heritage and the vanity of self-promotion of the people who make these videos for the fame of media production. These are, I think, dream fetishes that chase the logic of late modernity as the personalisation of media and the validation of individualism. I'm not alone in making a connection between YouTube and the cinema of attractions. For example, Teresa Rizzo notes that the exhibitionist spectacle and the seductive possibility of what might be seen by the YouTube viewer. She suggests that YouTube, like the early cinema of attractions, is dominated by a similar exhibitionism of acts of display that encourage gawking, but with the possibility of response and comment. And Rizzo regards the online video maker as a highly exhibitionist and participatory producer and showman inviting response. The similarities between early cinema and online video are very striking. So, for example, you could easily compare this video I'm going to show you in a minute, the Pancakes 2 video, which has lots of stop motion animation in it, to films like Segundo de Chamon's The Electric Hotel, which was made in 1908. Which has a couple checking into a hotel and miraculously things like their luggage unpacks itself using stop motion animation. But early cinema is an artisanal form of professional entertainment, whereas YouTube is a more hybrid and diverse culture. In terms of fleeting experiences, early cinema is quite ephemeral, based on the sensual shocks of modern entertainment culture, whereas YouTube is very much an ongoing thing. So let me show Pancakes 2, and I will say a little bit about it. James Provan is a Scottish student, or I think soon to be an ex-student, a post-student, who describes himself as a songwriter, video producer, who's made a number of videos in the last few years using stop-motion techniques. His video production has taken place around his student lifestyle, and as a YouTube user generating content, he's answering the call to broadcast himself. In the context of modernity, cinema developed as an entertainment culture of leisurely sensation, we're getting feedback or something, of leisurely sensation and distraction from the work of from work or domestic release. The computer has been used to complicate the experience of cinema and modernity. Provan, the self-named pancake man, has evolved. In terms of work hours or time spent making the videos, one can detect a growing commitment from a few hours or days. That video, he says, took him 90 hours to make, which is quite an investment of time for something which is essentially an amateur thing. Just realised I haven't got my PowerPoint working. I want to draw towards a conclusion then by raising some issues around this. That there is a wider context of new media and the continuity of modernity in which the self has become experienced anew through the adoption of new technologies. For instance, Thomas de Zengotita, in his book Mediated, has written about the mediated self and the virtual revolution. He argues that there's been unprecedented fusion of the real and the represented, a life shaped by a culture of performance that constitutes a quality of being, a type of person, the mediated person. He suggests that everyone has become a participant eyewitness to the world, and as a target of media they are flattered by the incessant attention of the media, creating the flattered self and a self-awareness of being in me world. A virtual revolution is being experienced, which happens when technological venues multiply and mediated spectators stake a claim to their own attention, joining or displacing celebrities. However, we've not only learned performativity, but how to be and to act in everyday life from media. But we're in the process of becoming media, and I think that's quite an interesting development. Cinema developed as one of the important spaces of modernity, of modern life, and cinematic spaces, such as the online moving image, are being used to stretch our engagement with entertainment culture and audiovisual experience. Earlier I mentioned there were two reasons why I was thinking about Benjamin's Arcades project. The second one is that Benjamin's object of study was the Paris passages of the early 19th century and the development of the arcades that he regards as the original forms of commodity capitalism, and that we can see in the precursors of department stores, shopping malls, e-commerce. So the arcades are forms, original forms of modernity, and the internet is a new electronic space of modernity, where the surfer replaces the flaneur. And for Benjamin, technology was potentially progressive and liberating, but this liberation gets lost, it never gets fulfilled, and dreams of liberation kind of turn into the delusion of commodity fetishes. Benjamin was less interested in Marx's commodity in the market than the commodity on display. And since the introduction of the VCR, the video cassette recorder, it's widely possible to possess films, to own films, at least to legally own a viewing copy and so on. And we've been able to physically get hold of films and have a much more closer relationship with films. But the participatory culture of things like YouTube, I think, is bringing about an interesting shift away from commodified films to commodified people. And I think that's the main thing that I want you to kind of take away today, is this notion of users on display. So it's you, as Time magazine said in 2006, with the rise of social media and the internet, it's actually you who are the important people here, the important thing about the internet. And I think that's kind of blatantly developing. Alexandre Astruc's concept of the camera stylo, the camera pen, promoted cinema as self-expression and personal creativity, so that film becomes primarily individual communication, like paintings or novels. And the participatory turn of web cinema as social media communication via the new wave of handheld cameras materializes the dreaming of the camera pen, the camera stylo. And I think, the self is flattered to communicate. So I see the rise of participatory media as a significant departure from traditional screening culture, a departicipation, if you like, departing from that. But I also suggesting a departicipation in terms of a rolling back of interpersonal social media, camera, pen cinema. And I would like to see a kind of very vibrant cinema culture, which is maybe a hybrid culture between online cinema and existing theatrical experiences. I want to finish, if I may, with this video from Howard Rheingold. Howard Rheingold is an American academic professor who's also a visiting professor at my university, who cuts a very striking figure around the campus with his hats and bright shirts, which looks great amongst the grey skies of a UK landscape. But when I saw this video, which he twittered just the other day, I was suddenly shocked out of a path, I think, that I was taking. And with my students, I'm increasingly using video as social media communication and getting the students to make videos. And I suddenly felt shocked out of that, if you like, the kind of propaganda and hype around social media communication. So I will finish with that video, but before I do, I just want to say that in terms of learning to participate and teaching media literacy, it seems that our attention is sought and the mediated self is created at a very young age. This is a UK, on the right, this is a UK very young children's programme called Get Squiggling, in which young children are encouraged to take part with a costumed actor called Squiglet, who shows them how to draw colourful characters and enchant them with animation. When Squiglet draws with her special crayons, the viewers at home sing the magic words together and the character leaps off the page and comes to life. So the drawings turn into animation. So it seems to me we are teaching media literacy and participation at a very young age. So I think what we need is perhaps more WeScreen, as well as a YouTube, and I would like to see, kind of maybe this fusion of online things and non-online things. The things I like are things like secret cinema, where films are shown in unusual venues, and maybe even things like virtual cinemas and things like that might be good experiences. So I will finish with this video that really shocked me out of my dreaming about the fetish of social media communication, of cinema as pen. Okay. So this is a homemade video by Howard Rheingold, who's an academic and teacher.
Vernacular is a fancy word for informal. When local languages like Italian and French broke away from Latin, which remained a formal liturgical language, they were called vernaculars. In regard to video, vernacular refers to the emergence of millions of video producers and of an informal, even conversational genre of video production. Just as scribal texts and scribal literacy was supplanted by post-Gutenberg printed texts and printed literacy, the era of expensive video produced by experts with expensive equipment and studios is being augmented, if not supplanted, by a new form of informal video production made possible by cheap digital cameras, laptop editing tools, and global many-to-many multimedia distribution networks. In addition to a revolution in the way we consume video, we're in the midst of similarly revolutionary changes in the way we produce video.
Hi, I guess you'd call this a kind of lazy web request.
Hey Howard, oddly enough I asked exactly the same question.
Hey Howard, good to see you here. Paul Swanson in Denver, Colorado.
New modes of consumption and production are co-evolving a participatory video culture. The way millions of people consume video has changed from small silent groups huddled in a dark room around their television to a multitude of ways that individuals and groups can look at screens of various sizes in many places, alone or together.
You can search for videos. You can subscribe to video podcasts. You can even carry on conversations via live video.
Can you hear me now?
I can hear you fine. How about me?
Super.
You can also embed videos in blogs, wikis, or forums.
Most digital still cameras have a video mode that's really pretty easy to operate.
It produces not bad video and not bad sound if you're close enough and the room is quiet enough.
With cameras like these, you can take a chip out of the camera that holds the video and plug it right into the USB port on your computer and drag that file onto the screen and it's ready to play or edit.
Like computers, video editing equipment used to require entire rooms and expensive equipment. Now, simple editing software is turning digital home movies into a population-wide practice, and the same advanced software that Hollywood studios use is available for laptops. If you have web access, you don't even need a laptop. Many free services make online editing easy. Then you can upload to your own YouTube channel, again, free of charge. Now that millions of videos have been uploaded, a mixture of professional and vernacular, original and remixed video is creating a new kind of cinematic culture, sometimes appropriating and warping commercial video to convey different meanings.
Spock, you sound terrible.
If the 170 million blogs that appeared over the past few years democratized text publishing to what is known as the blogosphere, video blogs are just beginning to create a vlogosphere. It's easy to copy the flash code that online services provide when you upload a video and then paste it into your blog. It's now becoming possible to include video discussions in a horizontal dimension and simultaneous text discussions of the same topic in a vertical dimension.
Hi Bruno, thank you for joining the conversation. There is a link.
People can reply directly either through video or text. In education, think about the possibilities of combining lecture and asynchronous online discussion between class meetings. Teachers like Michael Wesch are beginning to attract millions of viewers to the videos they have created together with their students. Over the next few years, video presentations and discussions will begin to show up in lesson plans from kindergarten to graduate school. Video vernacular is already changing popular culture, but only beginning to change teaching and learning.
Thank you.
Andrew, thank you very much. I open the round for question and answers if you would like to ask some questions or would make some comments.
Thanks. Yeah, thanks a lot. I was wondering, it seems like kind of a big jump from departicipation to Rheingold's Serenade to participatory media and the use of it in education. Could you elaborate a bit on that?
Well, I'm using departicipation in the sense of, I think, what Rheingold's idea of vernacular video as social media communication, I think is quite, although it was the kind of dream of, you know, the camera pen, that cinema would be a personal, very personalised thing. I think in some ways that is a departure from maybe what cinema was intended to be and what most people wanted cinema to be, perhaps. And so what I'm advocating is also a departicipation in the sense that can we unhook cinema culture a little bit from what I see as this kind of juggernaut of camera pen. You know, I think the camera pen is great, but I hope that's not the only kind of cinema culture that we have in the future. So that I think that's what I mean. Is that clearer? Yeah. I rushed through that a bit because I was aware of time there, but yeah.
Okay. Do you think these grassroots features are gonna affect the mainstream mediascape, the visual production of people who keep on producing with big equipment? And
I think one future is, if we look at history in hindsight, and I said how the early cinema began with short films, and then the Hollywood Dream Factory took over. I think that is one imagined future for the web. You can already, I think, see YouTube becoming more commercialised as it tries to monetize all that activity, and maybe the professional content will begin to dominate, you know, the amateur content, and the length of the videos will start to grow, as you know, and maybe as the internet maybe becomes a set-top box in the living room, or that kind of thing. But with the internet being such a, you know, a rhizomic structure, you know, it's going to be very difficult to eliminate that because the technology is very different from early cinema. So it's a very different situation. So it's hard to take lessons from history, I think. But can you see Hollywood social media communication? I mean, could you see Jim Carrey doing a vernacular video? Maybe. And people going to the cinema to see. I mean, yeah, perhaps. But I think
YouTube, by the kind of language that YouTube is developing, thanks to the users mainly.
Yeah.
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 Would you agree that maybe the gap in web cinema is between artistic approaches and conversational approaches? Because I think that's what also was shown in your examples when you leaped over to Rheingold. That's much more about conversation and passing knowledge instead of giving an artistic experience.
Learning something about the world through artistic creativity. Yeah, I hope we don't lose that. I hope we don't lose that sense of, you know, wanting to play around with the forms of cinema and communicate in some senses, for their own sake, rather than people trying to turn themselves into media, you know, and personalise. I hope that is one of the futures, and the potential is there, I think, for perhaps a more diverse artistic cinema, but I think it's going to get lost in the social media revolution, inverted commas, if we're not careful. I think artists, filmmakers, and people who use online video maybe have to be more high, you know, try and get more visibility to try and, you know, maintain some of that connection between personal creative vision and audiences, yeah, rather than interpersonal communication. I really hope that is one of the futures. Yeah, yeah. Well, I would like to see this hybrid form of where the internet is perhaps used as a delivery system, and we have maybe hybrid forms where you know, arrange a screening culture, perhaps, get more, you know, getting away maybe from cinema being an uploaded video and maybe something which is a screening, you know, is only available for half an hour or whatever, and you have to watch it and then it's gone, you know, or whatever, or maybe something like that, you know, that makes it kind of a special thing again. I don't know.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
Okay.
I think just